Okay, in this video, we are going to be talking about states, how they arose, and three similar terms that are a little bit difficult. They're tricky because they're close, all right? And so let's just throw this out here right at the beginning, all right? State in our normal kind of parlance, in our normal kind of talk, can mean a lot of things. We talk about and it's particularly tricky in our country because we talk about the state of Ohio and we talk about being the United States. And so it is tricky because that is not what we are talking about when we talk about state. I love how, and also, like I guarantee you, probably when you walk into school, there's all places where the state of Ohio, and now in the first week of class, I got to tell you, well, all right, so forget about that. Seriously, forget about that. When we talk about states, we are talking about something different in this class. So when we talk about a state, all right, we are talking about a territory that is organized politically with the power to make and enforce laws without the consent of a higher authority. That means that there is no one above them. So what's the problem immediately when we talk about the state of Ohio? Well, the federal government can tell the state of Ohio what to do. There's an authority above the state of Ohio. All right. Now, is there an authority above the United States of America? Well, there is the United Nations. What about that? We have the United Nations. It's interesting, right? At the end of the day, the United Nations cannot tell the United States what to do. The United States can agree to certain things with respect to the United Nations, but at the end of the day, if the United States says, forget about it, I'm not, or any country in the United Nations, forget about it, we're out, we don't care, we're done with the United Nations, this is boring to us, all right, this is, we have other alliances such as, why am I blanking? NATO, all right, like NATO, that's an alliance. Or you have things that are bigger than countries such as the European Union, all right? But we really want to remember that even though those are countries working together, those are states, I need to be precise with my language. Those are states working together, all right? At the end of the day, the highest authority that can actually enforce something that is binding where the lower authority can't just back out, all right, is a state, all right? And so now we have these kind of very close terms, state, nation, and country, all right? So let's talk about them. State is what we just said, all right? The United States of America is a state, all right? Canada is a state, all right? Mexico is a state. Chile is a state. Italy is a state, all right? It's a legal entity where that entity, that government, has the highest authority inside of a geographical place, all right? Now, a nation is an ethnic term talking about groups of people that identify with one another. And if we look, all right, at this map, right, we see ethnicities in Pakistan, which is just to the east of India. We see ethnicities in Pakistan. And so there are multiple countries where people identify as kind of an ethnicity, all right, inside of a nation, all right, inside of a country, and sometimes that bond can be stronger, and we'll talk about that. Now, a country is a geographical term. A lot of times, countries, all right, are also states, right? You have a country, the United States, right? You have the United States of America, all right? It is also a state, but it's also a physical place, right? It's a geographical term going to a place. Now, note, in popular usage, you can put these back and forth. And, sometimes when you're just talking about it, fair enough. It's on my hand. I know where that. I don't know what that is. All right. Sometimes they are interchangeable. But when we're talking here, we have to use precise language because sometimes we mean different things, and sometimes we need to compare those things. All right, it can be very important. All right, State and sovereignty. This is key. This is key what we were talking about in state, but it's really a restatement of kind of what I just said. It has the power in its territory to decide all sorts of things. All right. When we say the state is sovereign, we are saying that they are the highest authority. It's not responsible to anybody else. All right. And this is exactly what we talked about. The states within the United States are not sovereign because they aren't the highest authority. All right. They are not the highest authority in an international sense. Okay. In an international sense. Okay. How states arose. Well, I think we can cover this in this video as well. So there are different ideas. Like, look around. Like, what? Aren't you ever just curious? It just seems a little random that, like, this is just how things are, right? We have all these states, and it seems like it's kind of been going on for a while, all right? But what I want you to think about is it really hasn't always been quite like this. I mean, we go back in history, and you have, empires, right? And so it maybe worked a little bit different if you've took, world studies here at Watkins before government. You hear, you can go back even further. You talk about like tribes. You talk about, and maybe a tribal council, or you talk about the ancient Roman empires, or the ancient Egyptian empires, Alexander the Great. And so we haven't really had this kind of, or excuse me, and also even back to like the 13 or 1400s. Think about, we have, different, countries, but it was a very different system with like feudal lords and different kind of systems of organization. I actually, because I'm studying Italian, I don't know if I've mentioned it. I feel like I mentioned it way too much. Italy only came together as a country like we know it today in the 1800s. It was really a loose kind of confederation of like Venice and Milan and Tuscany and Sicily. It was really kind of more of a, and they didn't even speak the same language. So people have thought about, and why? And so there are 4 real theories. I think that they're interesting, but it really does help us to kind of start to think about this. So force theory, it's in the name. An individual group claimed control over and forced a population to submit. In this way, the state became sovereign, and those in control formed a government. So you get a group of people, right, that are a warrior class that can kind of get other people on board, and they conquer an area, and then they end up setting up the government that they want. And, that can... So what I'll just flag for you right now is that there's an interesting trade-off, right? Because if you rule with like with an iron fist, right, that can be good because you can do whatever you want, and maybe you can tax people a lot, and you can, no one's gonna kind of get in your way. But you have to understand that when you do that, you potentially make your population very unstable. Because if you're doing bad things to a population, if they don't buy in, then you're opening yourself up to a revolt. All right? Sometimes, I would almost say, and I think about this, it's a little bit the same in the classroom, right? I can do all sorts of rules if I want in the classroom, but if I'm a little bit more lenient, right, and the rules, everyone thinks that the rules are fair, and you get buy-in from everybody, I'm not going to have maybe as many behaviors that people acting out and being upset. It's the same for a state, right? If you have, think about if everybody in America thought that the government was completely unfair, and it was just a king, the American king, running around just doing whatever they want. Well, who's going to want to be a police officer? Who's going to report crimes? Who's going to pay their taxes? If people think that it's fair, on the one hand, more people are likely to buy in. All right. The divine right of kings theory. God created the state, making it sovereign. The government is made up of those chosen by God to rule a certain territory. The population must obey their ruler. I don't know that a lot of people... So how I would think about this is like a lot of kings just said this in like say 300, 500 years ago. They just say, I'm anointed by God, and therefore anything that I say goes. And if you disobey me, you're disobeying God. And so if you have a very religious population, obviously that can be extremely effective. And so people will listen to what you say, and people will enforce your commands because they believe that their afterlife is at stake. Third theory, evolutionary theory, population formed out of primitive families. Heads of the families became the government. When the family settled in one territory and claimed it as their own, they became a sovereign state. So it's like we kind of start from a tribe, and so then the tribes there's a council of elders, and then there's intermingling between different tribes in an area, and then there's maybe there's like 5 tribes in an area, all right? And then let's say they all kind of get together, and then they form a grand council of the 5 tribes. Oh, and so now we've got that. Oh, well, now there's another council, 10 kilometers away. And then as maybe they're building infrastructure between those 5 tribes, they build it out, and so then we start to see things that look like an organized government over a long period of time, over an evolutionary period of time. Social contract theory. Population is given in a given territory, gave up as much power to the government as needed to promote the well-being of all. In doing so, they created a sovereign state. And so, we've talked about this concept, obviously, in our first lesson, this idea that you give up freedoms, that you agree, all right, as a governed people, you agree to give up power, all right, in exchange for things like protection and infrastructure, all right? I know right now that I can feel pretty safe and secure driving to school. No one's going to steal my car or assault me, and that's pretty cool. What's on the other hand, I pay taxes on the income that I earn, all right? And I also agree that if I break those rules, that society